Hi, Dr. Thomas. This is my fourth presentation. Slight disclaimer before I begin. In my email, I had mentioned that it was going to be a Jungian style short story. However, it turned more into a short story following along with Campbell's ideas of the hero's journey. I may have gotten my terms a bit mixed up, and my thoughts may have changed throughout the writing process. Whoops. Anyways, enough rambling. Let's just dive on in. I was born in the misty fords of ancient Scandinavia. My name is Eric Ironside. I was raised by my father Björn after my mother died, bringing me into this world. I was raised in the old ways of the gods Odin, Thor, Freya, Loki, and the others in our pantheon. I studied not only the way of the sword and axe, but also the way of the seer. I had become a skilled warrior, as was my father Björn, but also had a deep curiosity about the mysteries of the world, which was uncommon among my people. After coming of age, it was now time for me to set out on my first adventure to prove myself as a man. My crew and I set sail in search of wealth, glory, and legacy. After being at sea for nearly a week, not having seen any sign of land nor people, we released a raven. Being trained in nautical navigation, I knew that if the raven did not return, then it had found land. Much to my delight, and that of the crew, the raven did not return. We followed in the direction the raven had taken and came across a small island where we decided to make camp. As we explored the island, we stumbled upon a cave hidden deep within the forest. The crew became weary of this cave and refused to enter, but drawn by my natural curiosity, I ventured inside. The cave was dark and damp, and I soon found myself lost in its winding ancient stone passages. There were drawings of symbols I was not familiar with, but that did seem to resemble the runes in which my people had used for centuries. But as I stumbled through the darkness, suddenly a faint light in the distance revealed itself. I followed the light and soon found myself in a large cavern illuminated by a strange, otherworldly glow. In the center of the cavern stood a woman unlike any I had ever seen. She had long, flowing hair the color of the sun, and her eyes shone like diamonds in the dark. She wore a dress of woven silver, and around her neck hung a pendant that glowed with the same otherworldly light which was illuminating the cavern. I was struck by her beauty and felt a sense of awe and wonder, while also feeling my wit and senses fail and leave me. I approached her cautiously, but she smiled warmly and welcomed me into her presence. "Who are you?" I asked, awestruck. "I am Freya," she replied, "goddess of love and fertility." I was amazed, as I had grown up hearing the tales of the gods and goddesses, but never had truly believed that they were real. Freya looked deep into my eyes and said, "You have a great destiny, Eric. You are meant for something greater than raiding and pillaging. You have a gift, a talent that only a few possess. You have the ability to see beyond what others can see. You have the powers of insight, intuition, and curiosity." Her words confused me. I had never thought of myself as having any special talents other than the skills with sword and axe. Yes, I had dabbled in the realm of the seers, but never saw much promise in it. I could hear her words clearly and plainly inside my head, but her mouth never made a single movement, nor opened even in the slightest. She was projecting these thoughts into my mind. Freya continued, "But with this great power comes an even greater sense of responsibility. You must use your gift wisely and for the good of all. Do not be seduced by the lure of power and wealth. Your true purpose lies in service to others. I will give you something that will aid in the great trials that you shall soon face." With those words, Freya appeared right beside me. She presented an outstretched hand, in which now lay the pendant that was once around her neck. Her words began again in my head. "It is with this pendant that you will be able to accomplish more than any of your forefathers and your descendants. With this gift from me, you will shape the hearts and minds of those around you, and even the world in which you have not seen yet. You will find strength unmatched, courage unwavering, and wisdom incomprehensible to all others around you. But if you forsake this gift, and you are swayed by the lust for wealth and power that plagues your kind, you will be thrust into despair and never be able to join those you have lost in Valhalla." I took the pendant Freya offered me. Once it was placed around my neck, the otherworldly glow subsided, but I could still feel its power and influence working within the metal that contained this true gift from the gods. I now found myself alone in the cavern, stumbling back out of the cave. It was not nearly as dark as when I had entered. Was this one of the new powers that I had gained from the pendant? Arriving on the surface, the crew looked at me bewildered by my return. They proclaimed I had been gone for nearly 3 days, yet it seemed only a mere hour or so since I initially entered. I recounted the events of my encounter with the crew, all of which were met with laughter and a certainty that I had drank too much mushroom tea and found myself on a bad trip for far too long. I was somewhat relieved that they did not believe me, as it allowed me to keep the true nature of my encounter to myself. As we sailed back to the village, I began to ponder the meaning of Freya's words and the implications of the gift that she had bestowed upon me, realizing that my focus had been on the material world and that I had forgotten the deeper truths of life. I found my resolve to use this gift to help others and to live a life of purpose and meaning. Upon arriving back in the village, I sought counsel with the village's truth seer, said to be the wisest and most in tune with the gods. I again recounted the events of the cave and presented him with the pendant given to me by Freya. At the sight of it, the seer was overtaken with its power and influence. The seer's refusal to hold it and shuddering away told me that this was not something to be taken lightly, and something that, as Freya had warned, could lead to great destruction. It was upon the advice of the seer that I would now take this newfound gift and go out into the world to shape and mold it how I saw fit. Over the course of the next 10 years, I would go on to become not only the leader of my village, but also to usher in a new era of peace and prosperity for my people. I found myself traveling to other nearby villages, meeting with their leaders, and unifying the whole of Scandinavia. I would organize mass raiding parties, the likes of which were never seen before nor after. Diplomacy, gold, and glory became the pillars of my people. The raids we conducted were no longer about domination or brutal murder. They became opportunities to enrich our knowledge base. We learned engineering and mathematics from those in the vast deserts, culture and class from those on the Isles of England, as they were known to us at the time, as well as food and wine from those in the great city of Paris. Yes, there was bloodshed and lives lost along the way, but the shedding and loss of life was no longer empty nor the sole reason for our raids. We had gained a greater purpose and sense of wonder from the world, the likes of which my people never thought possible. Some members of the raiding parties would even stay behind to act as bodyguards, ambassadors, and emissaries to those whom we had made great connections with along the way. Upon returning home after many long years of voyages and adventures, I was welcomed back like the unintentional king that I had become. The home I returned to was almost unrecognizable from the one I had left as a young man out to prove myself and hold true to the words Freya had instilled in me. However, I began to feel a sense of dissociation from those around me. There were things I had seen, languages I had learned, and experiences I had had that left me feeling an inability to connect to those around me. In my later years, I became a healer, using the knowledge I had gained to help others. My wisdom and experience had shaped me into a great counselor, offering guidance and insight to my people. But in the process of shaping the world around me, it seemed that I had forgotten to carve out a spot of my own. The daily lives of those around me seemed menial, unfulfilling, and simple. I found myself spending a lot of time alone, praying to Freya for guidance of my own, for how could it be so easy to guide others without my own internal compass? I began to resent the gods and the gifts they had given me. Yes, it brought wealth, development, and prosperity to my people, but I was unable to see its true cost. All of these things I had seen and done came at the cost of my own sense of belonging. I found myself wishing to live among the gods that had aided me in shaping this world. It was at my lowest point, alone on a mountaintop, pleading with the gods for intervention, when suddenly the same figure from the cave appeared to me. She had the same long, flowing hair the color of the sun, and the same eyes that shone again like diamonds in the dark, and the same dress of woven silver, having not aged a single day. As she appeared, her words began to swim in my head the exact same way they had in the cave nearly 30 years ago. It has been some time, Eric, Freya began. You look well, but the pleas and cries to us in Asgard would say otherwise. Are you not pleased with the work you have done or the things you have accomplished? Freya asked. I know what I have done here and throughout the course of my life has been for good. They have helped my people and the lives of the people whose lands I traveled to. But I found myself knowing too much, having seen too much, having been through too much. The sense of belonging that I had has long since faded. I no longer belong in this world of men, but I do not wish to fall upon my own sword or propel myself off this mountaintop. Then what is it that you wish, or that you would ask of me? Freya replied. Take me back with you. Allow me to live in Asgard among you and the other gods. I have accomplished more in this lifetime than any before me or any after will. But it has left me alone and unable to connect with the people that I have dedicated my life to serve. You have kept true to your past. You have kept true to your path. You were not consumed by the powers that I bestowed upon you. Your trial is over, and you have passed the test. So come. Come home to where you now belong. Claim your place among the gods. And with those words, Freya took my hand, and I found myself in the realm of Asgard, its beauty, majesty, and wonder, where everything the stories and fables of my childhood had proclaimed. I was home. So that wraps up the story. For the analysis part, there were a couple of aspects of Campbell's The Hero's Journey that I definitely incorporated. The initial call to adventure, of course, featured when I, the protagonist, however you want to call it, initially goes off to the island as his first journey away from home as a fully realized man. The supernatural aid as well as the meeting with the goddess kind of happen at the same time. And those are another key elements of Campbell's ideas. When the protagonist is given the necklace from the goddess Freya, the master of the two worlds and the freedom to live are the final two elements I incorporated in the story. Had my short story not been, well, short, I would have liked to flesh out more of Campbell's elements as well as the overall plot. But as I was writing the story, those were just the elements that stood out to me the most. So what does this story say about the cultures that produced it? The Vikings were a fearsome and brutal culture. They would pillage, rape, and destroy anything and anyone that stood in their way in their pursuit of treasure. They were never scared of going into battle. In fact, they welcomed it as they saw dying in battle to be the most surefire way to get into Valhalla, which was their own version of heaven. The Vikings were also great navigators and shipbuilders, reaching the coast of what is now Newfoundland, Canada, around the year 1000 AD. So cultural norms that are suggested in this story. So there were some cultural norms brought up in this story, but more of them can be drawn from the history that we know versus the story that I wrote. The Vikings were known to be, like I said, great warriors, explorers, and conquerors. They fought with a ferocity that had never been seen by those in which they encountered on the battlefield. The Vikings were also they defied typical gender norms as well. So women often fought side by side with the men, earning themselves the title of shield maidens, and they were also given property rights as well as the right to divorce their husbands. And of course, the Valkyries, they were all female, and these were essentially just the angels that were sent by Odin, who's known as the Allfather, down to the battlefields to choose those warriors who had died, but were worthy of being called up to Valhalla. So, what did I find personally compelling about this myth, or the myths that we're drawn upon? So, I've always been fascinated by the Vikings, their history, their language, writing systems, and the structure of their gods. They were able to travel such vast distances without any sophisticated navigation equipment, which is kind of incredible. They would rely on like I mentioned in the story, releasing a raven, which the raven is coincidentally Odin's symbol, or what the animal that he's most commonly associated with. So they would set loose ravens. They would use the stars. They would even use packs of whales that they would encounter in the seas while they were traveling in order to navigate. Also, my ancestors were Viking, so I've always felt a certain kinship or a draw towards that particular time period in that group. And as well as the Norse section was also my favorite portion of the course, so it definitely just felt right to discuss them in this presentation, since I've done Lord of the Rings and all the rest of them, so I might as well use something actually from the book. And lastly, I've always believed that if reincarnation is actually a thing, then I was definitely a Viking in a past life. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the course.